Hi everyone, Heather here with Astrology with Heather.com, and I am back with another special forecast. And this one is not a weekly forecast. This is actually a special forecast for the Venus retrograde that is going to cover the next 6 weeks of our lives. Venus stations retrograde this week on Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on where you're at in the world. For most of us, it'll be occurring on Wednesday. Maybe even, I don't think it'll be on Thursday for anyone, but it could. So, we have this period here this week where Venus is stationing. Venus is very strong in the skies. When Venus retrogrades, it's much closer to the Earth, and the energy of Venus is much more powerful, which is why Venusian types of themes become much more predominant. And so this week, we're going to have this really strong Venus energy that's going to be highlighting something that needs to change or that we need to reevaluate when it comes to our material possessions, when it comes to what we value and the way we spend our money, and especially when it comes to our relationships and our connections. And those connections that are going to be emphasized are more than likely going to be Gemini types of connections. And so this is going to emphasize communication in relationship, the way that we connect with others as a community, the way that we engage with our neighbors, the people in our immediate environment, the people that we've been stuck being surrounded by, on a physical plane at least for the past several weeks, reevaluating these types of relationships, reevaluating relationships with siblings and extended family members, reevaluating our relationship with our community and the way that we utilize our resources in order to impact our community, looking at things like reinforcing local supply chains. That's going to be a big thing over the next few weeks, especially as we're entering into a potential food shortage, which is more than a potential. I think it's going to happen. And so we're coming into this period here where we have to look at where we're sourcing things from. Is there a local source where you can get your food? Is there a local source where you can get your body care products, where you can get whatever it is that you need? The supply chain has been severely disrupted. Even before the whole lockdown and the national emergency was declared in the United States, we couldn't get a new dishwasher because appliances were not being shipped from overseas, and appliances are typically not made in the United States. And so, it's still going on. We know people who are, trying to redo their kitchens and they can't get appliances. So we need to start looking at these things, right? Because if we're not going to be able to rely on these overseas, these foreign supply chains, which is a thing in all countries right now because things have become so globalized, how are we going to get the things that we need on a local level? And that's not just food, that's a lot of things. And so this is a time where I think on a global scale, we'll be reevaluating local supply chains pretty intensely. This is also as we start to reopen, sort of as predicted here, as we start to reopen certain businesses and we start to reintegrate and figure out how to socialize with this sort of new normal, one of the things that we're going to be looking at is how can we support local businesses and local infrastructure so it doesn't crumble. And so that's going to be a big thing as well. Looking at smaller businesses, with that Gemini energy instead of these big global corporations and conglomerates, that's going to be a big thing. And one of the things I actually just posted on Facebook, I'm trying to think of things that we can consider and solutions that we can look toward, especially with all of this Gemini energy, because I feel like it provides some sort of outlet for just restructuring things and taking a better look at the way that we're communicating, integrating, and the way that we're interrelating with one another, but also taking a look at our community, right? What's happening here and now in our immediate community? How can we enforce those community connections? And how can we localize things more? But also looking toward different methods for communication, different methods for commerce, which is a Gemini thing, shipping, delivering, that type of thing too. And so, a lot of people are getting groceries delivered. A lot of people are getting supplements and normal household goods delivered. And most people are getting those delivered from Amazon. And, that's kind of something we're moving away from, right? We're moving away from sourcing things from places that lack integrity. That's that South Node in Sagittarius. We're moving away from anything that's not in alignment with our integrity with the South Node in Sagittarius. And so maybe looking at ways that we can source things if we have to order online from small businesses that share similar values to our own, where we're supporting a person or their family, as opposed to a giant monopoly that has questionable business practices a lot of the time. We can think about, hey, where else can we source this from? Maybe it's going to cost a couple extra bucks, but I can swing it. Maybe it's going to take a couple extra days to ship, but I can swing it, right? Like looking at where we can take that hit, that inconvenience, in order to support something that's in alignment with our values and integrity. I think that that's important. That's not necessarily a Venus and Gemini thing, but again, looking at sourcing things locally and looking at, commerce and things literally involving delivery. I think that the structure around the Postal Service and UPS and, those types of things, FedEx, and even some of these smaller delivery type businesses is going to be reevaluated and changed. And I think throughout this time, new alternatives are going to emerge to pick up the slack, because there's a lot going on there. And then the other thing too, that the most important thing here with this Venus and Gemini that's going to impact everybody in a different way is looking at your communication and your relationships with certain figures, certain structures, and especially on that local community level, because that's that Gemini energy. Looking at things like our daily commute and the cost of that's going to be a part of this, I think, as well. But this is really about our relationships. So do you know your neighbors, right? If things get locked down again, do you have people you can rely on and source things from within your community? Do you have any connection to your community or community at all? These are things that we need to think about. How can I reinforce my connection with my community? And how can you kind of reevaluate the way that you communicate with other people in a way that's more fair, balanced, equal, where you're taking into consideration maybe where they're coming from a little bit more, because that's a huge issue right now during a time of I thought things couldn't get any more polarized from where they were at, and it's insanity right now. Going on to social media, especially Facebook, is just, oh my goodness, it's alarming. So, looking at maybe how we can communicate with others more effectively in a way where we're taking into consideration their values, their needs, their thoughts, their beliefs, their ideas, right? That's that Venus energy. It's mutually receptive. It's like, hey, I have my own opinions, but I'm still taking into consideration your point of view and trying to understand where you're coming from with this information you're sharing or these ideas that you have. I think that's one of the best things we can do, and that we can reevaluate during this Venus retrograde in Gemini. So when you're communicating and interacting with the people that you're talking to on social media, or even your friends, family members, people in your community, and they're sharing opinions that you completely disagree with, think about maybe how you can figure out where they're coming from. My good friend Criselda Pacheco, who's been on this channel, her and I had a conversation recently where we were talking about this whole concept, which is something that I always try to do when I'm talking to people. I have my Mercury in Libra, so I'm always trying to figure out where they're coming from and to kind of create balance and to not really push my side unless it's something I'm really passionate or really certain about. In which case, sometimes I do go a little overboard. I got Mars opposing my Mercury too, but that's something that I'm trying to always create balance with. And so we were talking about, this whole thing that's going on and how people are just like yelling their opinions and nobody wants to consider anything except for, what confirms their bias. And she had this excellent idea for an exercise that people can do, and I highly recommend that you all do it. Also, you should jump on over to her channel. She hasn't posted a ton of videos yet, but she will someday. Eventually it'll happen again. She'll kick that back up, but she has a lot of brilliant insights when she does do her videos. But anyway, so what she was suggesting that we should all do, which I think is a great Venus retrograde exercise for all of us, is to find someone in our lives, or to even find someone in the media or sort of like in the public sphere who we completely disagree with, who we despise, who we feel like we can never agree with or get along with, and like go to their website and find the nugget of truth, find that little diamond in the rough, find the thing that speaks to us and that rings true somewhere in there, right? And a lot of times, most times, you're going to be able to find that where, oh, well, now that I'm not just immediately reacting to what's being said here, I see that they're coming from this place, and that one thing they said, I actually believe that too, right? And so you can see where there is some common ground, and there's always going to be some common ground in most circumstances. You can do this in your conversations with people too, you guys. You can talk to somebody or listen to somebody who has a different opinion than you, and you don't have to immediately become reactionary. You don't have to immediately argue with them or be thinking about how you're going to counter their point. Focus on what they're saying and try to understand where they're coming from. Ask follow-up questions. Get to that nugget of truth in what they're saying that resonates with you, that you connect with. And oh my goodness, you're going to have such better connections and better conversations. Even when things do turn into a little bit of a debate, it's not going to be this heated, like angry thing. It's going to be a little bit different because you're going to have a better understanding of where this person's coming from. You're going to have more compassion. You're going to be able to see their point of view. And sometimes you'll see that their point of view is stemming from the same place. You might disagree maybe on the solutions to the problems, but maybe you agree on the problems. You know, that can be your source of connection there. So I think we should all look at this. I think that this is something that everyone should be doing. And yeah, so definitely if that feels good to you, check that out, try that exercise. It's something I've done kind of in bits and pieces as I've been speaking to people in general, but actively thinking about doing that and going out of my way to do that is a little bit of a different thing. So that's my Venus in retrograde exercise for you guys. That comes from Criselda Pacheco. That's not my idea, but I love it, and it really speaks to the way that I try to approach things that I don't agree with. So that there you go. So anyway, the other things that we can do during this Venus retrograde are going to be more related to the placement in our charts. But the other thing I do want to mention before we get into that is the fact that Venus is going to be making a big, powerful aspect this entire time that it's in retrograde. And it's actually stationing in this aspect, which is one that we spoke about 2 weeks ago, which is Venus in square with Neptune. This is an energy that can be delusional. It can be sort of floaty and out in the ethers. It's an energy that could potentially bring up lies, deception, gossip. There's like 10 sides to every story right now, and there's a reason for that, because we have this confusing energy around information and the way that we're connecting and sharing things with each other and the way that we're communicating with each other. And it's like, you don't know what to believe, right? We have this energy here of Gemini, which is information, and it's like information overload, and there's like 20 different sources and everybody's saying different things, and it's very confusing. That's because we've had this energy of Venus squaring Neptune for 2 weeks now, and Venus is stationing, so it's going really slow, and so it's strengthening that square. And, we need to keep an open mind and realize that none of us is going to have all the answers. Even if we think that we're seeing things super, super clearly, there's more to the story right now. There's always more to the story, regardless of what side of the fence you're on. You don't know the answers fully and completely right now. So just like maybe humble yourself in that way. I'll humble myself in that way. And maybe we'll get along a little bit better that way too. But so there is this energy though where we might be deceived. We might be deceiving ourselves. We might receive deception from other people. We might unintentionally spread misinformation or deceive, others without actually meaning to. This could also bring up rose-colored glasses related to situations pertaining to the placement of Venus and Neptune in our charts, which we'll get into, where we're seeing what we want to see and we're not seeing what's really there. We could also be, scapegoating people in our lives, and that could be part of it too. And that's also a part of seeing what we want to see. We've already decided that somebody is a certain way or that their viewpoints are invalid, and so we're writing them off, right? And that's something that with that practice that Criselda shared, that I just shared with you guys, hopefully she's okay with that. Hi, Criselda. Hopefully with that, you can kind of step away from that, right? And realize that there are many points of view and they all have validity in one way or another, or a lot of them do at least. But there can be this energy of wanting to scapegoat certain people in your life or certain concepts or information, or, this is a big thing. And so you don't want to create this situation where somebody you care about becomes the scapegoat for whatever you're going through, or whatever like anger you're holding on to or repressing, or whatever it is. And so that's a big energy too. This is also an energy that has to do with martyrdom, and it could be martyrdom on behalf of your community. You could be martyring yourself on behalf of a specific relationship, and that's not always a good thing. So that indicates that you're trying to help other people to your own detriment, and that's not necessarily a healthy expression of this energy. And that's something that we need to look at as well. Martyrdom, scapegoating, spiritual bypassing, like everything is just love, light, and rainbows. Nothing's wrong here. This relationship is great. That type of thing can be an issue too. So you can go too far to that side of the spectrum as well. Right now, it seems a little bit more like the other side of the spectrum, where it's like scapegoating and crazy misinformation and nobody's understanding each other, but it can go both ways. So kind of just be aware of that. And this is an energy that can be super, super indulgent, and especially indulgent in a fantasy world, indulgent in things that feel really good, that are dreamy, indulgent in substances, and especially food, because it's Venus. Anything that feels pleasurable, people are going to be prone to overdoing it in order to escape from the reality of what's going on right now. And so we need to also be aware of that. This is a time where we need to stay more grounded. There is a lot of grounded Earth energy right now. We have that Pluto-Jupiter conjunction that's still looming in Capricorn. And we have Uranus and Taurus, which is not the most grounded energy, but it's an Earth sign at least. But we do have some grounded energy there. It's intense, but it's there. I do think that it's going to be hard for us to keep our feet on solid ground right now. It's very easy to get swept away in fantasy, get swept away in lies, get swept away in, our delusions of what we think is right or what we think is going on in a certain situation. And so this is a time where we need to check and double check ourselves. And I think that's what this Venus retrograde is really bringing in. It's like checking your assumptions, checking your misconceptions, trying to decide if this is real or not real. That's going to be a big thing here. So there can be some confusion that comes up. The good side of this energy is that it's Venus, and I talked about some of the good things we can do, like creating community, reinforcing better relationships with people in our immediate environment, reinforcing better communication with everyone in our lives. And that's especially going to be apparent as we move farther into the Venus retrograde. As we move into June in particular, Venus will come out of that orb of the square to Neptune, and especially toward the very end of the retrograde, it's going to be like, nowhere near Neptune. It'll still be in a sign-based aspect, but it's not going to be in that exact aspect, so it won't be quite as intense. I think that's where we get to step back in June and gain a level of clarity. Like, wow, I can't believe I thought that one thing was true. I can't believe I thought that person was that way. I completely misconstrued all of these different circumstances and situations, and we'll get our feet more on solid ground then, only to kind of move forward and have one last pass of this in July, where it's like, oh, I still am holding on to these delusions or these misconceptions or this confusion around this situation, but now I see it clearly and I can resolve it, right? So that's going to be part of the process. But I do like the energy of the Venus retrograde, especially after this middle of May period where it starts. And it starts to come into middle to end of May, actually, because the second pass of Neptune exact in square with, or Venus in an exact square with Neptune, is actually on May 20th. And then we'll have that final pass when it moves direct on July 27th. And so we get this sort of opening up at the start of June through the middle of June, and even into the end of June, because Venus actually stations on June 25th at 5 degrees in the sign of Gemini, where it's like, okay, I can see things clearly. I'm a little more grounded about my relationships or my financial situation or whatever it is that's been going on for you personally. And I think that that's going to be more of a relief, even with Venus being in retrograde. That's where we get to kind of reverse and say, okay, I got to turn this ship around. All right. And so I do have a forecast for you for all 12 signs. I know that was a little lengthy, but we are talking about a 6-week transit. And I have a lot of thoughts about this transit because I've been thinking about it a lot. It's hitting my chart pretty intensely. And I know that this is kind of a big thing right now with everything that's going on. The astrology has been intensified. And I've been noticing, and a lot of people that I've spoken to or that have been commenting on my posts have been noticing, that the energy of the astrology is playing out way more literally and way more more intensely than it normally does. It's like in your face, like literal, like this literally is the thing that the astrology describes. It's happening right now in the exact moment that the astrology is coming exact, and it's like so in your face that you can't ignore it. And I've been posting a few examples of that here and there, especially with that Scorpio full moon. That one was weird. But yeah, so I do have a couple of quick announcements before we move into the forecast for all 12 signs. The main one being that my summer electional astrology guide is now available. Today is the very last day to get 20% off, so you can still get the pre-order discount, even though you're not pre-ordering, because it'll be available as soon as you register. And this is a really deep, extended forecast for June, July, and August, where I'm looking at electional astrology, which is the art of choosing the best timing to ensure success in anything that you plan or that you want to accomplish for the summer. And so I worked really hard on this. This was actually kind of difficult to pull together because there was a lot of research involved and a lot of, putting together all of the pieces here, but I think I've chosen some really great dates for you guys to help you to be successful in whatever you want to create. And so that link is down in the description below. Even if it's not this day, you can still, receive the forecast, but the discount ends tonight at midnight. And the second announcement I have is that my series Astrology 101 is now available on Ickonic. You can get a 7-day free trial with Ickonic and if you want to view that series and see some of their other content. I'll have a new episode of the series posted every single Monday on there, and it goes really just all over the place with what astrology is, the history. The next one I think is going to be actually about the history of censorship and the suppression of astrology, which is interesting because I just posted a video about internet censorship. And so, that's kind of interesting timing there. But I go into different astrology techniques, what it's used for, examples, things like that. So I highly recommend checking that out. They did a really great job editing it and producing it. The link for that is down in the description below as well. And I think that's pretty much it for right now. I'm working on some projects, but I'm kind of just wrapping up all of the crazy projects I've been doing for the entire first part of the year right now, so I can move into something else. All right, so let's get into the forecast for all 12 signs. I got to do some rearranging here. Until I get a bigger desk, there's going to be rearranging happening every week. All right, so this forecast, we're going to start with Aries, Aries rising. So for Aries and for Aries rising, Venus is stationing to go retrograde in your third house, which is very literally the house that involves your neighbors, your neighborhood, your community. And so you might be rethinking, just like I said at the start of this video, it's more literal. It translates more literally for you, which oftentimes it will because you're in Aries and those signs line up with the houses in a way where there's a lot of congruency. And so with Venus retrograding, it's stationing to go retrograde in your third house. And so this is a time where you're going to be rethinking communication. You can have really important connections from your past, maybe even from grade school, which is a third house thing that can come back around over the next 6 weeks. So you can either reintegrate those connections, or you can figure out how to resolve old issues with those people that have been left unresolved. And so you can kind of go back, revisit those relationships and move forward. This is a great time to start thinking about reinforcing your connections with your community and your neighbors, your neighborhood. Do you know your neighbors? Do you like your neighbors? Can you figure out a common ground so you can like your neighbors and get along with them? Is that possible here? Because this is something that that's gonna be coming up for you. This could also be something involving vehicles and short distance travel, especially in partnership with other people. Or there could be an issue where there's a big expenditure that you want to kind of invest in when it comes to a vehicle, or maybe even like a camper or something like that, some sort of thing that you're driving. But, I would caution you to wait until June if that is the case, because we'll have that Venus in retrograde and it will not be in square with Neptune anymore. The other thing that I should say with Venus retrogrades is that it's really good for, they're really good for finding good deals on things that are used or things that you can repurpose. And so you don't want to buy a new vehicle if that's something that you're doing. If that's the case and you really are dead set on a brand new fancy luxury vehicle, wait until Venus goes direct. If you're looking for a used vehicle, then this might actually be an okay time, but you want to make sure that you don't have that Neptune there. So you want to wait until June when, you have a little bit of a better clarity on the way that you're spending your money. This is also you looking at how you spend your money within your community. Maybe thinking about starting like some sort of community organization, maybe thinking about frequenting the farmers markets, or how you can support local businesses or community types of projects. Maybe you can team up with somebody for something of that nature. This is also you rethinking your marketing and your communication related to your work or your business or your communication style in general. You can have really weird, confusing communication coming in right now, and it might be very unclear. You'll be able to take a step back and understand things much more clearly when we come into June, and maybe even to the start of July. But right now, just know that you don't have the whole picture. So if there's something coming in and you feel like you know the answer and you're just, frazzled by it, just know that the clarity actually might not be there just yet. Also, this could be a time where you want to like mentally check out and just kind of float off in the ethers and disengage. That's okay to a certain extent. Maybe indulging in like a fantasy novel or something like that. That would be a really good Venus third house, Neptune square type of thing to do. However, just make sure you're not going too far with that and completely disengaging and letting yourself completely lose sight of reality and what's going on in your immediate environment. All right, and for Taurus rising, Venus is stationing retrograde in your second house of finances. So for you, this is literally about getting your ducks in a row financially. There can be old bills, old debts, old, situations that have financial impact on your life that you thought were resolved and that are not resolved. And there can be a lot of confusion around those types of things, especially at the start of this Venus retrograde. It's like all of a sudden these things are coming up and it's really weird and confusing. And you're like, what is this bill? What is this bank statement? What is going on here? Or it could even be related to your pay or something along those lines where it's like, I thought I was going to get this much and I got that much. Why is this not working out? Why is my budget not balancing? So you're going to have to kind of take a look at the way that you spend money. This is also not a great Venus retrograde for spending money, especially on like luxurious types of items. So you want to make sure that if you're buying something, it's secondhand, it's something that is of really great value. And maybe wait until June for any major purchases just because of that square to Neptune, which is so strong. And so that's going to be a big part of this as well. But reevaluating the way that you utilize your resources, reevaluating your budget, reevaluating any important relationships with people that have that financial connection. So maybe your CPA messes something up and you have to reevaluate whether or not you want to continue with that accountant, or if you want to go and hire someone new, right? Or if you want to revisit an old relationship financially or something along those lines. And so that is Taurus and Taurus rising. For Gemini and for Gemini rising, Venus is stationing to go retrograde in your first house, which is the self. It's your personality and it's your appearance. This is one where you can feel kind of awkward about your appearance, and this is going to be especially the case if you have your Venus anywhere between 21 and 5 degrees, so 5 and 21 degrees. It's going retrograde, so I set it in retrograde. But if you have your sun, moon, or rising, especially your rising, anywhere between that 5 and 25 degrees in the sign of Gemini, you're going to be feeling this the most. On the one hand, with Venus being so strong, you might feel more attractive, you might feel more beautiful during certain phases of this transit, but at others, you might just feel like you have low self-worth. You might feel like you're not beautiful, you're not good enough. You might have some concerns about your appearance. This is one of the most common transits, you guys, that I see when clients ask me questions like, is Venus retrograde okay for getting like some sort of beauty treatment? Is it okay for me to get plastic surgery in the middle of a Venus retrograde? Short answer is usually no, especially when Venus is retrograding your first house. Not the best time for that. It's not likely to turn out well. You're likely to have to go back and have additional treatments to correct whatever has gone on there. Or even if it goes well, you're not going to be satisfied with it. A lot of what you're experiencing, even though it feels physical, it's not necessarily physical. It's more about your self-worth and the way that you value yourself and the way that you feel other people value or don't value you. So it's looking at issues of self-worth, especially tied to your body or to your appearance, or just feeling awkward in your own skin. Like that can be a part of this too. There could also be issues very literally directed toward you involving some sort of like acclaim or some sort of recognition that you're getting through your work that could be confusing or misconstrued in some way, where it's like you're getting credit for someone else's work, or you don't know why you're getting this sort of praise and you can feel uncomfortable or awkward with it. Or there can just be like an uncomfortable sort of it's like an uncomfortable spotlight is being put on you, like where you're getting some sort of attention and it's like you're confused about it. That could be part of that energy too. And this could also just be you having a period of identity confusion. So it's kind of like, who am I? What am I doing? You're confused about your relationships and what you value in life, your direction in life, that type of thing. That'll lighten up in June, and you'll start to see things a little bit more clearly before Venus goes direct and moves on. All right, and for Cancer rising. So for Cancer, this energy here is occurring in your 12th house. This could be involving some sort of hidden relationship that comes back around for you. So like a secret love affair. This could be, you looking at, you're probably going to feel more prone to kind of turning inward and spending more time in solitude, contemplation, seclusion with this energy here. This would be a good time to kind of retreat and retrograde back into focusing more on rest, reprieve, especially in partnership with somebody. So this could be a good time to kind of take time out from the normal day-to-day experience and break away from normal daily realities by doing something really creative or really relaxing in partnership with somebody else. If you don't have that necessarily in your life, or that's not available to you, this can be an outlet for creativity. This is also where you might have old relationships coming up really strongly in your dreams, where it's like, why am I thinking about this partner? Why is this coming up over and over and over again? Why is she in my dream? Why is he in my dream? That's a big thing with the Venus retrograde in the 12th house. And usually when that happens, your subconscious is telling you something that is just unresolved, that you need to work through, pay attention to before Venus goes direct and moves forward and all of that. So that's something to consider. And it can be really confusing. It's kind of like, do I still have feelings for this person? Is this person thinking about me? What's going on here? Like it can almost cause like delusions about your relationships or your past relationships. So you need to kind of just realize that you're not going to get clarity on what this means, if this is something coming up for you, until probably June, when we have Venus no longer in such a tight square with Neptune. And so that's something to kind of just make note of as well. But this is a really great time for creativity for you, or to learn something creative, kind of go behind the scenes and like learn a new creative skill or work on a creative project or focus more on your spirituality, especially if you're doing so in partnership with somebody else. It's kind of like hiding out, but hiding out together. For Leo and Leo rising, Venus is going retrograde in your 11th house, and this is the house that has to do with friendships. If you have your Leo sun, moon, or rising, especially your rising, anywhere from 5 to 21 degrees, Venus will actually be trining your descendant during this time. And so an old close friendship or an old relationship of some kind could come back around and be reintegrated in your life in a positive way, or you could have just one final positive experience with that relationship at some point during this 6-week Venus retrograde transit. If it happens at the start of the relationship, you might misconstrue what's going on and think that there's a level of intimacy that might not truly be there, but that doesn't mean that the situation won't be positive. It will be, but there's just sort of like a tension or an irritation or an awkwardness there, where maybe you think something is different or they think something is different than what it is. But this could be like, especially a friendship, like a platonic relationship. A lot of old friendships can be coming up in your mind and also in your experience right now. If there are any financial issues or situations involving finances that are tied to groups or to friends, like maybe you have a friend that owes you money and maybe they're lying to you in some way and you think that, they're just trying to scam you or whatever, you might not have the whole picture right now. And so you want to kind of wait that out before you call them out on something that might not actually be true. Same thing goes with like a group or organization that you're a part of. You might feel like you're being misled or scammed in some way, or you might actually be misled or scammed in some way, but you don't know the whole picture just yet. And so it's going to be easier to resolve if you wait until June for that. But this is a really great time to think about the friends that have fallen by the wayside, that you haven't been paying attention to, that you miss and that you enjoy connecting with, and thinking about reintegrating that sense of community, that sense of that, like, having that tribe in your life by engaging with them, right? Just getting back into that swing of things with like communicating more habitually with the people that you care about, that you haven't spoken to in quite some time. Maybe there's a friend that you had a falling out with and you decide that you want to go back and strengthen or renew that friendship in some way. These are all things that you can do a lot more easily during this Venus retrograde. All right, for Virgo and for Virgo rising, Venus is retrograding in your 10th house, which is the house of career and public reputation. This, normally Venus in the 10th house is good for your career and public standing and for the way that other people view you. It can be good for your business. You can bring in more money. You can have some sort of thing that you put out into the public. It could be like a marketing campaign or a product or whatever it is, and it's well received. But right now, there can actually be a lot of confusion around your career and public reputation, especially if you're midheavens and Gemini too. And so this is a time where there can be it's like you want to show up in a certain way, you want to be seen, be liked by other people, and what you think that you're putting out there and projecting is not necessarily the feedback that you're getting from others. There could be issues involving finances that can be really confusing, related to your career, your work, your business, something along those lines. And you might have to kind of go back and revisit and maybe even take a step back or step away from your work for a little while so you can gain some sort of clarity around whatever it is that's going on there. That could be a big thing, and you'll get clarity, especially as we come into June and you've taken that step back. But if you're feeling super confused about what's going on in your career, if you have really confusing feedback, if you're having a confusing time in your work-related relationships or your relationship with your superiors, bosses, people in positions of authority, and you're not quite sure what to make of it, that's going to let up. So you need to just kind of take a step back there and reevaluate those relationships and the communication in those relationships in the meantime. But know that you won't have the whole picture just yet. It's going to take some time for you to get there. All right, and then for Libra and for Libra rising, Venus is retrograding in your 9th house, which is the house of your beliefs about God, the universe, the world around you. And so this could be a time where you realize that the thing that you believed so strongly to be true might not be so, and you might have been misled or deceived in some way. You might have been sharing information or teaching other people something that maybe wasn't as true as you thought, or it wasn't as useful as you thought, or maybe you've confused people and they've misconstrued your words, or what it is that you were putting out there. This is a time to reevaluate your beliefs and to start to take into consideration the beliefs and values of other people in your life that you've written off, and that you've maybe not been considerate of. So this is one of those times where that exercise that I mentioned at the start of this video could be very, very handy. So looking at your connections with people, and if there's somebody in your life who you are just like at your wit's end with and you've just written them off because you just disagree with everything, this is a great time to reevaluate that and to start taking into consideration their point of view, their beliefs. So maybe you can save the relationship, and maybe you can learn something and expand your mindset, expand your viewpoint as a result of doing this process. And so I think that this is, a really important thing. I think that this is going to be very helpful for you. This could also be, maybe there's some sort of partnership with somebody who is in a foreign country, and there can be some confusion, or you might have to go back and resolve something or revisit something with a past relationship with somebody in a foreign country. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean a relationship romantically. It could be a business partnership, a friendship, something along those lines. But relationships with people in foreign countries, or even contracts or agreements that involve foreign countries or foreign entities, you might have to kind of go back and revisit, because there might be something that's clouded, confusing, misunderstood, or something that needs to be changed or resolved. And so this could be, a part of that as well. This is not the best time to enter into new relationships or agreements or partnerships or new travel plans, even especially if they're in partnership with somebody else, just because there can be issues with that. But revisiting old types of relationships related to that can be helpful. And I would say that especially work-related relationships, because that 6th house energy is at play here with that Neptune, can be very confusing at this time, especially if they're involving foreign entities. But just know that in June, that will lighten up. And so you'll take a step back, you'll get some clarity. You'll be like, wow, okay, now I understand what's going on here. And you'll know how to proceed moving forward. All right, and for Scorpio rising, this Venus retrograde is happening in your 8th house, which is the house of joint finances. It's the house of debt. It's the house of taxes. It's the house of joint finances through marriage. It's the house of insurance, inheritance. I'm kind of smirking because like Venus is stationing go retrograde, and we just got like all sorts of really weird, confusing bills and stuff that are all wrong. It's so literal, you guys. It's so literal. And that's going to be fun to sort out. Maybe it'll get sorted out at the start of June. You might have that happen. So that's the moral of the story here. You can have some confusion, some issues involving joint finances. You can have some issues involving your partner's paycheck that might come up. That might be confusing and that might be difficult in some way. This doesn't necessarily have to involve finances, but it can, and it likely will for a lot of people. But it can also involve intimate connections with people, or connections with people where there was some sort of issue with power and control, or power struggles, or manipulation of some kind. They can come back around and they can come back into your consciousness. It's almost like you got rid of someone who was manipulating you or trying to control you, and you thought they were gone once and for all. And that person or that entity, it could even be like a financial institution, comes back around and says, hey, I'm still here, remember me? And so you realize you didn't really let go of that. And so you need to do some additional work, and you need to work through it, let it go, release it once and for all. And it's going to be unclear to you whether or not you should even do that at first. It's kind of like, should I let this person back in my life? Should I take on that extra loan? Should I do that thing? Don't do it just yet. Wait until June. You'll get some clarity. You'll be able to finally take a step back and see things in a way that you can't see them right now, because your judgment when it comes to these types of relationships or financial deals are very clouded. So you want to make sure that you're waiting until you have that space before you decide if this is a good thing to reintegrate into your life. All right, for Sagittarius and for Sagittarius rising. So for you guys, you're going to have Venus retrograding through your 7th house, which is the house of relationships, partnerships. This is a time where old flames, especially old, long-standing romantic partnerships, can come back around, and you might have to either reintegrate that relationship or do something to resolve unresolved issues in that relationship. And so old communications can come back around. Old contracts and agreements can be renegotiated at this time, or might require a renegotiation at this time. This is a time where old friendships, especially close personal friendships, can come back around, or maybe you have to revisit something in a business partnership or in some sort of business related collaboration. And so that could be part of this too. If things like this are coming back around for you, this is going to be a time where it can be a little bit confusing, because you have Neptune actually squaring Venus in your 7th house. And so it's kind of like that old flame comes back around, and it's like, is this because we're meant to be? Maybe not, but maybe you think it is. If a new relationship comes in, usually that's not really a good thing with Venus retrograding in your 7th house. It's usually not going to last, or you're not going to be seeing that person quite so clearly right now. And when Venus goes direct, the relationship will change, or your viewpoint of that person will change, especially with the lack of clarity with Venus in retrograde. If you are in partnership right now, you might be reevaluating your partnership or the dynamics of that partnership, or they could be foggy or confusing right now. And so there could be some confusion around relationships that you have to kind of go back and revisit and sort through. And especially at the start of June, you'll get some clarity and you'll know how to proceed moving forward. All right, for Capricorn and for Capricorn rising. So this Venus retrograde is happening in your 6th house, which is the house of health, work, and daily routines. This is also, when it comes to interpersonal relationships, which is a big focus of the Venus retrograde, this is also the house that rules employees or subordinates or people that you manage if you're in a management position. And so this could be kind of some sort of confusion or miscommunication around people that you employ for your business, people that work under you, wherever it is that, in whatever role that you're in your career. This could also be you reevaluating how you treat people who are in maybe a subordinate type of position in your day-to-day life, like the service workers and things like that you interact with and engage with, and maybe wanting to get to know these people a little bit better, or wanting to have a better understanding of the people that you interact with in your life, or wanting to have a better understanding and a better relationship with your coworkers. That could be a part of this too. Not just employees, but wanting to have a better relationship with your coworkers and the people that surround you in your work environment. That could be part of this. There could be some confusion around finances related to your work right now, or some sort of financial situation related to your work right now. And there could be confusing communication coming in around financial situations, or confusing communication coming in from your coworkers or employees during this time. And you might want to just act on it because you feel like you know what's going on, but either you're going to be deceived, you're going to say something based on misinformation, or you're just not seeing things quite so clearly. There's something you're missing that you really need to know about in order to put this together and to have the appropriate response and connection with whatever it is that you need to connect with here. So kind of taking that in mind and just knowing that in June you'll have this period where things will lighten up there, you'll get that clarity, and you'll know how to proceed moving forward. All right, and then Aquarius and Aquarius rising. So this energy here with Venus retrograding in your 5th house could bring up old romance, old flames. This is a time where, like an old love affair, an old fling could come back around, and it could be really exciting for you. You can get some strange messages maybe from somebody who you used to love and you used to care about. This could also be you reevaluating your relationship with your children, if you have any, and kind of looking at, the dynamic in your relationship with your children and what that looks like, and maybe how you could change that to make it better in the future. There could be confusion around, relationships with children, or issues involving children, especially financial issues involving children or child care that you might not have the whole picture, so you might not have the answers right now, or you might be misled, or you could end up spending like a ton of money on some sort of child care thing or some sort of schooling, and realizing that that was a mistake. And so you want to kind of be aware of those types of things. And so kind of taking your time, evaluating things, staying grounded, and maybe taking a step back and waiting, if you can, until June to make important financial decisions related to your children. If you have any, that would be a big thing. This is a good time, though, to revisit any old creative projects that you've sort of let fall by the wayside, so you can finish them up, or you can reintegrate your old hobbies, interests, the things that you're passionate about that bring you pleasure back into your life. That would be one of the best things you could do with this Venus retrograde energy. All right, and then Pisces and Pisces rising. So for you guys, Venus is retrograding in your 4th house, which is the home, family, and property. This could be a time where you're going to be forced to reevaluate your relationship with your family members or your housemates. This is also a time where you might have family members who you've lost touch with who might try to reconnect with you, and you might be a little bit confused around the circumstances, or you might have the wrong idea about them, or they might have the wrong idea about you. And so there can be some miscommunication and some difficulty there. However, if you kind of take a step back and you wait to respond, or you wait to sort of draw any final conclusions about it, especially until June, you might be able to see things a little bit more clearly. New connections related to home, family, property are not necessarily going to be what they seem. And so if you're like looking for a new roommate, maybe you should hold off on that search, because the person that you bring into your home is not going to be what you think that they are throughout the Venus retrograde, this next 6-week period. And so, maybe taking a step back and waiting until Venus goes direct to do that. But maybe you want to move back in with an old friend or an old roommate, or somebody who was in your life and they're coming back into your life. That would actually potentially be okay. Just know that there is a part of the situation that you're not seeing clearly. This could also indicate financial issues related to your home, your family, your property, your place of living that, again, you're not seeing clearly, or that you have to go back and like reevaluate, or you have to kind of maybe even renegotiate the terms when it comes to your rent or your mortgage payment or something along those lines. And you think you have the whole picture, you think you have a really great deal going on, but you're not necessarily going to see it very clearly, so you might end up, you know, on the end of like a bad deal or something. And so you want to, again, make sure that you're taking a step back and taking that time, and maybe waiting a couple weeks if you can. This is a good time to redecorate your home, one of the best times to redecorate your home, and to take things in your home like furniture and other household items that have gotten kind of old or worn out, and to make them beautiful and make them new again. This is also a great time to shop for secondhand furniture and to repurpose it and make it beautiful again. And those are things that you can do that are not only creative and have that Venus-Neptune energy, but they're really utilizing that Venus retrograde energy, and they're utilizing it in a positive way. It's better to repurpose old furniture, or to go thrift shopping and buy like an old table and, you know, sand it and refinish it or something like that, than it is to, you know, have really confusing relationship issues with your family members come up. So, you know, you might be able to use up some of that energy more positively by doing that. And that is my forecast, you guys, for all 12 signs. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, be sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends if you feel like they might benefit from this insight. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.